1000 Hours Outside podcast. My name is Ginny Urich. I am the founder of 1000 Hours Outside, and I have a friend on with me today, Leslie Martino. Welcome.
You. It's so good to
Thank
be here.
you. Thank you for taking an hour. You are a busy mama of four, so I am just so thankful. Leslie and I go way back till last fall. Well, we've known each other online for a while, and but isn't it fun to meet in person?
Oh, that's like my favorite thing, especially when
Yeah,
you feel
like,
like you connect with someone online and then you meet them in person. It's like we seal the deal.
yeah, it's the coolest. So we met last fall at the Wild and Free Conference in Franklin, Tennessee, which is one of the highlights of my life. Those conferences, aren't they fun?
Oh my gosh. Yes. A
They're
lot
so
of
fun.
fun.
It's indescribably fun, really. You
Yes.
know,
It's not like any other typical.
yeah, fun
conference.
and just deep. You
Hmm.
just leave being very touched. So we both were speaking at the Wild and Free Conference. We met there, and Leslie turned out to be an amazing actress, right?
That
It's
was
so
so fun. One
cool.
of my fondest memories.
Yeah, so we were going around. We actually Leslie was going around and doing these little spots, and I was there a little bit too, but we got these cute little mugs from Penny and Pearl. She had a little shop set up there. So that was fun. We met, and yeah, it was such a great event. And then we got to meet your family, which was so awesome, your
Oh,
husband
that's
and
great.
your beautiful kids. So will you take a minute and just tell us a little bit about you and your family?
Yes. So my family and I, we live in Central Florida. My husband and I are originally from New York, but we live in Central Florida now and we have four kids. My oldest is 12. My middle child is, I have to think about this. My middle child is 9. And then I have twin 7-year-olds. So
Oh,
we're
these are
very
fun
busy.
ages.
Yes, very
And I
fun.
got to meet them. They're so cute. And is your 12-year-old, is she taller than you now?
Mm,
Did it
yeah.
happen?
It
It
did. She's
happened.
taller than me now. I'm
Oh,
hanging on to an inch though. I don't know. I keep
yeah,
telling her, no, no, you have an inch more. I keep saying that, but
yeah.
yeah,
And it's cool because you're twins, and then your middle son, they look so much alike. So
they do.
everyone thinks they're triplets.
Everybody asks if they're triplets. They used to really be bothered by that, and now they don't correct people anymore. And it's actually hard
Aw.
for me not to laugh because I know the truth. And then when
Mm-hmm.
people say that, they're just like, mhm.
Oh, that's awesome. They're really such awesome kids. And I think one of the things that draws me to you quite a lot is that you just have this beautiful life. And
Oh,
we sort of met through Instagram, and I think there's a vibrancy to your family that is both online but also in person. And so there's that consistency there. And so uh,
thank you.
I was scrolling through your Instagram, getting ready for this, just a little extra, and I was like, oh, it's just very touching. So,
Oh,
okay, let me read a little bit about what you have on your website.
okay.
You just do a lot about intentional motherhood, also homeschooling with joy, and just living with joy. It really permeates. You have a background in elementary and college education, and in the movement and fitness industry. You've been a teacher, a lecturer, a mentor, a dancer, and a Pilates instructor. Oh, that's full. I love all that kind of stuff. You're also a coach, a homeschool coach, and an educational consultant, a writer, and you just do a lot. That's awesome. That's so cool. So your website, you have four main topics across the top, which I think are just so intriguing. You have homeschool, motherhood, health and wellness, and natural living. So, of those four things, what is your favorite thing to write about?
Hmm. That's a really good question. I think it's always changing, which is probably why there are four there. I couldn't just narrow it down to one thing. Um, I knew that I like to share my experiences in all of those areas, but there are some times when I just really want to talk about education. And then there are other times where I just really want to talk about motherhood. And then there are times when I want to talk
Yeah.
about some of the other things that I put up on that blog. And I started that blog. I just knew that I wanted to share and I knew that I liked to write, but I actually hoped that nobody would read it.
Aw. And so many people read it
It was
because you
just
have wisdom for the world.
It was just like one of those things like where writing was such a cathartic experience and I just needed to get it out. But then
Mm.
when people started to say that they appreciated things that I wrote or they learned from something, it really inspired me and motivated me more. But it's still like hard, like just kind of weird for me to, like believe. It's just kind of like that thing about an artist putting out their work and then people watch it. It's kind of scary. I don't
It
know.
is. It's nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Well, because then people know more about you and what do they think, and um, you're putting out your heart and your soul. So,
Right.
yeah, and your website is beautiful. It's such a
Oh,
beautiful site, and
thank you.
um, it's a treat that there's so much information on it. You also talk on your website about your coaching. So
Yes.
tell us about that.
Yeah. So I do coaching with mostly homeschool moms, but one of the things about homeschooling is that you quickly realize that most of your focus actually ends up being about parenting. And so a lot of the coaching that I do is also about parenting. And one of my passions really is just to talk and coach people about being intentional. And I talk a lot about intentional motherhood. I talk a lot about connection with my kids, connection with your children as a parent, and that's what a big part of the coaching is about.
Mm,
So it's about meaningful connection with our children and what that looks like and what disrupts connection and how to be intentional and removing distractions and things like that. But then there's also, like I said, I do coaching that's also related to homeschool. So we talk about how that looks in the homeschool context and things like that.
those are really interesting points. And there was something that stuck out to me on your website. You talked about how you said, it's amazing how even in a loving home, a
Mm.
child can feel unseen.
Yes,
I
yes,
was That was a powerful statement, and it's
yeah.
true.
It
So is that
really
something
is
you can
true.
kind of talk about,
Sure.
which is how
Hmm.
can you have intentional motherhood, and how can you sort of make sure that you're having these moments of connection in your home?
Yeah. So I really believe that we were all meant to be in connection with one another and to be in connection with one another that's really vulnerable and exposed. Like we're supposed to be able to be that way with one another. And I think when I think about connection, it really is love because one of the ways that I define love is a deep and meaningful sense of belonging and connection. And so, one of the deepest levels of that connection is what I like to think about as a naked connection, where you can have that vulnerability and you can have that exposure. But I think that we all have these layers, including children, parents, adults, all of us. We have these layers
Mm,
of self preservation that we put on, kind of like
yeah.
as protection, but they're really the opposite of what a vulnerable connection is. And so when we want to cover up, and not be exposed, it's because we somehow have let some sort of fear set in or guilt about something, or, we're carrying some shame about something and we're not comfortable with the idea of exposure anymore. So we go into hiding.
Mm,
And I think that my job as a parent, when I see that happening with my child, is to call my child out of that place and to help them to understand that I'm that there's safety. I'm not a perfect parent, but I aim to be an authentic one and a growing
mm.
one and a loving parent. And so I want to
Oh, I love
make sure
that.
my children know that they can be vulnerable. So I call them out of that place and I say, you can still come to me. We
Mm,
might have things that we need to mend or heal between us or in our relationship, but I want you to be able to come to me. Um, because, like I said, those layers that we put on, um, I pretty much kind of boil them down. My husband does a lot of coaching as well. And so we actually talk about this a lot together. But three of the things that we boil down those connection disruptors to are guilt, fear, and shame.
mm,
So guilt is like, okay, I messed up. I didn't do something right. And we have guilt maybe because it's yet another
mm.
time that we responded to our kids in the wrong way, or we
Yeah.
had another argument, or we failed them somehow.
Yeah.
Like people talk about mom guilt a
Oh,
lot.
well, yeah. Oh, yeah. I
We're so
Everyone has it. Yeah.
yeah, we're good at feeling
Mhm.
guilty.
Yeah.
But then sometimes our kids feel guilty as well because there's a
Mm,
sense of disappointment. Maybe they didn't meet our expectations somehow. And
yeah.
there's that guilt there. And then shame is often what we feel because of guilt. So it's the weight of that guilt in terms of that broken relationship or that broken expectation. And it's feeling like we haven't lived up to some
Mm,
specific external expectation, whatever it is. And sometimes that causes embarrassment. And then, yeah, I'll tell you a quick story. So one time, my daughter, she was taking dance classes, and I was a dancer, and so I love the fact that she was taking dance classes. And she was one year just burst out into tears and said that she didn't want to take these classes anymore, and she really just wanted to take like some musical theater classes that they also offered at the studio. And she was crying, and I was in
mm,
shock because I couldn't believe she was crying
mhm.
because she had somehow felt that she was letting me down by
Aw,
not wanting to do these dance classes.
yeah.
And I was like, wow, somehow she had gotten the message that there was this
Mm,
expectation that she be just like me or that she liked the same things that I like. And so she felt this sense of like broken expectation. And there was actually like like a layer that was separating our connection. Do you know what I mean? Like
mhm.
that was something we
Yeah,
needed to just dismantle
yeah,
right there and then
yeah,
because it was like something that I did not want her to hold on to.
yeah.
So, that's a small example, but it can happen in so many ways. And then fear is a big one because fear is uncertainty and it's dealing with the unknown. Now, many times as parents, that fear can be
Mm.
exhibited as control. I know that's something
Oh,
that I also talk about a lot. So even if we don't want to admit it at first,
wow.
there's a need to control that comes through in a lot of our parenting. And I think it's something that we
Mm,
really do need to be conscious about because that control is really just birthed out of fear. And now, so uncertainty makes us feel insecure, and that's not good for any kind of connection.
mhm,
And then sometimes control is like our act of trying to jumpstart certainty. Like we want to feel more secure, we want to
mm,
feel more certain about things, so we try to control it
yeah.
because most of us, we weren't parents before we were parents. Like we spend most of our time trying to figure this all out. Um,
Yeah, I mean, yes, I feel like that is like such a key point. Like up until like literally the day of having the child, the first one, I felt like I had some sort of control of my life, and
yes,
then you have this baby, and I'm just like, oh, this is out of control. It's chaotic. And like
yes,
for, I mean, our oldest is 13, so almost similar to your daughter, but for a very long time, I was like, when do I get to go back? Like, when
right,
will it feel less chaotic? But it really never has happened. So I'm
yeah.
assuming that maybe it's not going to.
Right. Exactly, exactly. And we try to hold on to that, gain control in so
Mm,
many little ways, even just throughout the day, like
yeah,
especially when you've got little ones and toddlers and you're just trying to maintain a sense of
yeah,
control. Um, but the thing about that control is that what we focus on, we tend to maximize. So if we're always focused on controlling every moment of the day,
mm,
then we're really maximizing what needs to be controlled instead of minimizing. And then that means that we're minimizing our ability to be present and our ability to really enjoy a moment or enjoy our kids, which is what we all really want to do.
yeah,
And that means we're really missing out on something, because we all want a more fruitful experience in our parenting.
mm,
We all want joy in our parenting. um, you know, constant control might allow us to get a lot of things done, like do this, do that, or,
mm,
like a well oiled machine or something in our
yeah,
household. But what it robs us of is the fulfillment part. We want to enjoy our kids. And that's what I want to help people do. And that's what I want to do. It's not easy. I don't get it right all the time, but I
yeah.
want to spend a life enjoying the family that I have.
Mm. Do you have advice? I think that control is actually a huge issue. I think,
Hmm.
it's one that I hear about a lot. Control perfectionism, I think they kind of, they go hand in hand.
Hmm.
Do you give advice for parents that are really struggling in that area?
Well, I think it comes down to, in a lot of ways, managing. our reactions and
Mm.
managing our expectations. Um, the thing is that there's a woman. She wrote a book called Connection Parenting. She was speaking at that
Yes,
conference
yes,
that we just
Pam. Pam Leo.
Pam Leo.
She's been on the podcast too. I
Oh
adore her.
yes,
Adore her. And
she's
she's so wise
she's
and
so wise.
yeah,
And
and so
she said,
personable.
she really is personable. And she
Hmm.
said, and I know I'm probably going to get this quote wrong, but she said something to the effect of, um, we all have, like, as parents, we have an ability to choose. We can choose to evolve
Mm.
or stay the same,
Yeah.
something to that effect. Um, and I think that that's really true because we have a choice in that area. And so when we start to notice our reactions and we say, no, I need to manage these reactions. That means that we have to first realize where we're getting it wrong and then just try to do differently. It's all about a lot of times our intention. And then
Mm.
managing expectations. Sometimes we expect things that just aren't really realistic, you know?
Yeah.
Like expecting our kids to always behave or expecting them to always fall in line without ever having grace for them to ever get it wrong, or
Right.
and we expect that from ourselves also, and it's just not, those are just not realistic expectations. And then I also like to think of it sometimes as like the space that we hold for our children has to be larger,
Mm.
because when we're holding space for them that's large enough to fit them, we see like more potential and possibility for what things can be. So even in terms of like, who they are as people, like your relationship with them, even if you have a strained or broken relationship with a teenager or it's like, if you if you always look at it through the lens of like possibility, like what could this be?
Mm.
And I might see this, but what could this look like? It's like expanding our view a little bit. And I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel
Yeah,
like
it
that's,
does.
yeah, I feel like that's part of the key to not controlling. We have to figure out other ways of seeing things.
Hmm.
Mm.
I think it makes me think like, you said you get to choose, and I mean, we're all growing. And I think that's a beautiful part of parenthood. That it's a
Right.
part that I wasn't expecting,
Yeah.
is that um, there ends up being all this beautiful growth because you have to. You know,
Because you
there's no
yes, but
other
that's
choice.
exactly right. You can't, it would be, it would make for a very interesting parenting experience and relationship if we just weren't willing to grow
Hmm.
at all,
Yeah.
ever.
Right.
And I want that to be said of me. Like I want, I'm very close to my mom. And I want, when I'm my mom's age and my kids are my age, that we are sitting around and we're talking about their childhood and they have fond memories. They have more beautiful memories than they do sad ones.
Mm.
Because my mom wasn't perfect, but ask me to
Right.
tell stories about her. And I have more stories, good stories to tell than bad ones.
Yeah.
But I think
Absolutely.
that's something that she actively and intentionally tried to create with us,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah. So I'm curious who's inspired you because
Yeah.
I like to read. I've read a lot of books, but I've never read a book or anything about a child in a loving home who feels unseen. This is actually a whole brand new topic. These things that you're talking about, I think, are very pertinent. I think, especially in a day and age of screens, because it makes me think about, well, if I'm on my screen, it's really easy for a kid to feel unseen. But so, what has your path been like to be to this point where you have all this wisdom to share?
Oh, gosh, that's a really good question. That's a really good question. So I think it's multifold. Some of my biggest influence has been my parents.
Aw,
um,
wow.
we had a very, and you might hear my voice get a little shaky, because we had a really wonderful, rich childhood. It wasn't a perfect experience. That we experienced a lot of hard things, but there's been so much growth in that process. I think my shaky voice, I apologize for that. I'm thinking about my brother. My brother is no longer with us. He
Mm.
died, and it was
Yeah.
growing up. It was just me and my brother,
Aw. When did
and
he
I
pass?
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
When did he pass?
In 2000. Yeah,
Oh,
so it's been a long time.
yeah.
But, um, my parents, they worked very hard. Um, they were both immigrants to this country, and they worked very hard to not only do the things that most parents try to do, give us a decent life and expose us to different things and have different interests and things like that, but they also worked really hard at the connection piece, which I think is a really interesting perspective from immigrant parents because
Mm,
they felt like in a lot of ways they were losing their children to a new culture.
wow.
And my brother and I have to, with the same upbringing, had two radically different reactions to the life that we had. And I think that everything that I've seen and everything that I've witnessed and everything that I've experienced, I'm a bit of a deep thinker.
Mhm.
And a deep feeler. And so I have spent a really long time thinking about things and knowing that it would directly influence um, the childhood that I attempted to give my kids.
Yeah.
And my husband and I also, he's also a very deep thinker. And we talk a lot about these things. And I'm sure he could say, he could talk about his end and,
Hmm.
his perspective and the stories that he has and how those shaped him and how he viewed parenthood. But I think it's all of that because to be honest, I do love to read people like Pam Leo and
Hmm.
people who talk about parenthood and connection with kids and relating to kids. I love children, so which is probably why I got into education. But I think all of that goes into it. But it's not like I've ever found anyone either who's talking and thinking about these things. It's
Wow.
actually thought I actually have thought maybe I should write a book.
Well,
It's,
yeah, it's
yeah.
not out there.
Mhm.
And that's wild to me. I like to read, but I'm not coming up with my own stuff, you know? I mean, what a neat thing, Leslie. Like this is based on, your own experiences and what you've learned and all these things you see in the world, and it's so valuable. I want to buy the book. So just,
Oh, well, thank
let me
you.
know
You want
when
to
you
buy a
write
book
it.
that hasn't
You
even been
you're
written,
you're
but
a big
means so much.
writer. You're a big writer. You write for Wild and Free.
Yes, I do.
And you have just the gorgeous photos in there. Um, and how many do you keep track of how much you've written for them? Is it often? Uh,
I write an article every month. There are
wow,
yeah,
every month. That's a
every
lot.
month. Yes,
Good for
and there are
you.
definitely months that I've taken some time off, especially if I'm helping Wild and Free with another big project. Sometimes they
Hmm.
do some other big projects like classes that they create or just other things. And I'll be helping with that. So I'll take a break from the monthly articles. But yeah, once I started writing, I really do enjoy it. And there's always an option to take some time off but writing, I
Yeah,
like I said,
you like
it's
it.
cathartic. I like it. And
Yeah, and your
I think
photography. I mean, it's phenomenal.
I
You're
have well
artistic.
that's
You're
I'm yes,
creative. You're a
definitely.
dancer.
But I have to give a
Yeah.
shout out to my friend Kayla because she does the photography for those articles.
Oh,
So even though
cool.
I love
Oh,
photography
that's
myself for
fun.
the articles, that's my friend.
That's fun to do
She does
together.
beautiful work. Yeah.
One of the things about what's interesting, really interesting to hear you talk about your parents and your childhood. And oh, I'm so sorry about your brother.
Oh,
I
yeah.
bet you miss him all the time. Yeah,
I do. I do.
yeah. And didn't get to meet your kids. That's so hard.
It really
Um,
is.
yeah. You talk about though that that they had this special wisdom about them, where they were able to strive after this connection, and you're just always sharing things that are so touching. And then additionally, this has passed down to your kids.
Yes.
So you always have, I think I've never seen this anywhere either. I think it's the coolest thing ever. You have all these quotes. People share quotes, and the quotes are from your kids. So can I read
Yes.
a couple of them?
Oh, of course.
Okay, so this one's from Miles. He says, blow your mind with ideas, learn and have fun with your experiences, learn how to learn. And then one from, do you say Maya or Mia?
Maya.
For Maya, connection is being able to sit down together and not say anything, just to be there, to be in the moment. And one more from Ethan, and I know I left out a son, so I'm so sorry to the one I left out. Things that make a good connection are eye contact and speaking with your heart. So when did you start? I mean, these are great. These could be in
So,
your book.
you want to hear something funny? So,
Yeah.
when I was a little girl, my dad would write down things that we said. And I didn't think anything of it. And I knew he was doing it when I was a little kid, but he just did. And then one day when I was maybe a late teenager, possibly early 20s, I was going through some old books with a friend. And my friend was just getting such a kick out of these books and was laughing,
Oh,
hysterically laughing, because she was like, there are so many quotes in here. Your dad wrote all of this down. And I actually had not even remembered that he had written all
what
these
a
things.
gift.
And I thought, now I know where I get it from, because I started doing the same things with my children, and it was really cool to have that as a memory. And so I started doing it, and it started to just be little things, like when they were little, they would say something really cute or really sweet, so I'd write it down. But then, as technology advanced, I had my cell phone, and I have these notes on my phone, and each kid has a note, and then I just periodically go in there and I just write stuff they said. And it's to the point now where my kids, like, we'll be out in the woods somewhere hiking, and somebody will say something and I'll be hysterically laughing, and another kid will say, "Oh, you thought that was funny, mommy, huh? Write that down, write that down."
They
Yeah,
know
like
what's going on. That's so cute.
but sometimes I ask them pointed questions,
Yeah.
and I write down the answers. And sometimes they just come out with stuff out of the blue, and I just, try to stop everything and jot it down, because and I do it because I'm a lover of words, and I
Mhm.
just want to remember.
Mhm. When it's so cool because it like they have so much wisdom being so
Mm.
young. Like these are the things that are important for all of us. Like we all need to know how to speak with our heart and have good eye
Yes.
contact.
And you know what? You're
So,
so right, Jenny. That's actually a lot of reasons why I write their words. I feel like kids have this simplicity
mm,
and purity about them that really has taught me so much. They're like my biggest teachers, and they say these things that just wow me. And I feel like, gosh, if I could only see things with the eyes of a child, or I could
yeah.
only, and so constantly recording those words and putting their words out there helps to remind me that things are probably more complicated and
Mm,
need to be more, more simple.
yes. Yeah, they just strip it down, right?
Yeah.
To say
Hmm.
learn how to learn. Have fun with your
Yes.
experiences. Blow your mind with
Blow your
ideas.
mind.
Aw. Your life just like I've said before, it just exudes joy. Um, so what are some of your favorite things to do with your kids? What's everyone interested in?
Okay, number one on that list is being outside in nature, which is how we started doing 1,000 hours outside. What that's one of our favorite things to do, is to hike together and to just be
Yeah,
outdoors in nature together. And sometimes we do that with our hiking group, or we do that with friends. But to be honest, my favorite times are when it's just us alone. Um, and I just feel like it's like our special thing. And there are so many crazy things that happen. So many crazy things
yes.
that happen to us out there on those trails. But I love that we have those stories to just reminisce on and laugh about. Um,
I think like what I have found is that you remember outdoor moments more, and I think it's because it's more of a sensory experience. It's
yes.
involving all of your senses, and so
Mhm.
and we remember. So I think like something like baking cookies falls into that category too because you're really using a lot of your senses. So any of these experiences, whether indoor or out, they tend to sort of solidify in your memory. And what I really love about these outdoor experiences is they're like unique expressions of your family. Like those are the things that no one else shares. When you
Right.
go on these different things and you have these different small or big, unique experiences, they're your own.
Mhm. We had this one time where we were out hiking somewhere, and there was a small body of water with like a really large tree trunk that had fallen and created a bridge over it. And my kids really wanted to cross the bridge. I was a little bit nervous about it, but they assured me that it'd be fine. And so I said, okay. And they started to go across, and lo and behold, one child fell in the water. Now, we live in Florida, so you can just imagine what's in the water. Um, didn't see any gators around, but at the same time, there was definitely a lot of nervousness, a little bit of fear that set in. But what was really interesting about that experience was everybody's responses. And so it was sort of like in a moment of panic, what does everybody do? And, it was, we had to really, after everybody was safe, we really had to debrief and talk about it because it was actually a really emotional, intense experience for a lot of the kids. And they realized that, when they see a loved one in danger, um, like one child started yelling at the rest of us to jump in and do different things and started to just direct us. But he did it with such intensity that was making everybody nervous. And then
Hmm.
another child just broke down and started crying. And we were able to just talk about like different
Wow.
responses to things. And, when we see each other in vulnerable places, what we feel like our responsibility is. It just led to like this really deep
Wow.
conversation, right? Like
Yeah.
out in the middle of the woods. And it was really good. And we would never have had that experience had we not gone out there.
Mhm.
But I think
Yeah.
what you said before was a really great observation about those sensory experiences, because even just thinking about other things we like to do, like reading books together, that
Hmm.
auditory,
Yep, and that would
like it's
count,
just,
right? Because you're feeling in your, I mean, they
yeah.
say with the books that you're vividly imagining all of it,
Hmm.
in your mind. And so that, that's a similar type of a thing. It's an
Yes.
adventure.
It's
It's an
an
adventure that
adventure.
you're doing together.
Yes. I
Yeah.
love it. I just love those kinds of adventures. Greta,
Oh,
she
I
wrote
love
the book,
Greta.
yeah, about adventuring with kids. And I think she says that in there. It's not just about the outdoor adventures, but,
Right.
you know, with kids, anything is really an adventure. Like
Yeah.
sometimes we get in the car to go 5 minutes away. And because of how you approach it, because of what you do, it becomes an adventure. Anything can
Hmm.
become an adventure with
Yeah.
kids, which is, they're so fun.
I do love that she talks about that because she talks in there about how her mother had some physical limitations and so
Mhm.
wasn't able to do maybe many of these outdoor things. I think she did a lot of that with her father, but she said her mom read them all sorts of books, and you're adventuring together in those moments and having those shared experiences.
For sure.
Um, Lizzie, you're just a bright light.
Aw.
Really,
Thank
you
you.
know, I think, like I said, being on your Instagram and following your stories, and I know you're in the Wild and Free magazine, it's like seeing all this imagery and the things that you post, they just make you want to be a better person and try these new things and to be closer. And you can just see that you can see the connection between your family members. Isn't
Yeah.
in a picture. It's
I really
um
appreciate that. I really
yeah.
do. A lot of, I think most of the pictures that I probably post on Instagram are not, pictures that I'm saying smile or pose,
You're
or
right,
it's
and
just
that's
that I walk
it.
around and, just
Yeah.
snap them doing whatever they're
It's
doing.
your
So I'm
life.
glad that that reads.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
does. So you have just a wealth of resources as well. I want to talk about some of those. So,
Okay.
you have your 30 days of connection calendar, and when you're
Ooh,
describing
yes.
it, you use this phrase, maximum joy. I love
Mm,
that. Um,
yes.
and you talk about things that can make the child more visible in the home, and like, do
Right.
you want to talk about your connection calendar for a minute? Like,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
sort of this concept of we talked about it a little bit, but visibility and invisibility in the home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I created that calendar. It was an outgrowth of the coaching program that I do, actually. We spend 4 different weeks on different topics, and one of the weeks is on connection.
Let me
And
interrupt. So the coaching program, I wrote this down, is called Thrive at Home.
yes, Thrive at Home
Yeah,
coaching
tell us
program.
about that just real quick. It's a 4 week, it's a group coaching
Yes.
program.
It's a group coaching program. It lasts for 4 weeks when we meet once a week. And every week, there's a different topic that we kind of dive into. And then there's like a workbook and homework for yourself throughout the week. But it's about clarity and vision, connection and joy, rhythms and routines, and then just your journey of growth. And I actually, it's not a homeschool focus, that one, but so many of the things we talk about are not related to homeschool that I actually think I'm going to create another one that's just for motherhood.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because
Well, right. Well, you and I were talking before we hopped on here about
mhm,
how, when we homeschool, we're doing some schoolwork at the home,
right,
to varying levels. Some people are doing, an unschooling approach where it's very child-led, and some people, it's such a range. It's a beautiful thing, you know, um, how we find what fits for our family. But you had said, and I agree, it's like this is really just parenting.
right,
It's like doing homework together. It's like parenting
yes,
with some academics. But and that's how I feel about these different homeschool conferences, like the Wild and Free, or
mhm,
a different homeschool conference. It's like any parent is going to go and get so much out of those because it's mainly parenting and
yes,
mainly
and
modeling.
not to mention, I think many homeschoolers could probably attest to this. Um, that if you only just focused being at home with your kids, if you only just focused on the things that you're doing, like school, um, you would probably struggle quite a bit. I think if you focus
Yeah.
on, I always, I don't think I'm the first person who said it, but that whole thing about making connection, the core curriculum, like that's what I feel like the focus is, because when school is done, the thing that remains is the connection that you have with your child. So if you let that fall by the
Wow.
wayside just to get something done, I just feel like that just feels awful. Like
Yeah,
that
you
just
kind of
doesn't
missed
seem
the
like a
mark.
really, yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So
So,
this connection calendar
yes, hmm,
kind of is birthed out of this 4 week group
yes,
coaching that you offer, which I love the name of it, Thrive at
thrive at
Home.
home.
It's
Yes.
fantastic.
So it was birthed out of that. But when I created it, I realized that it's something anybody could do. And so I shared it on Instagram. And at first, I was really shocked about the amount of people who just went to download it, because this is something I offer for free. And I say, hey, let's do like 30 days of connection with our kids.
Mhm.
And so there are prompts where every single day I try to cover different kinds of connections with the prompts. So I always think of connection in terms of like mind to mind connection, body to body connection, and heart to heart connection. So there's things that like are supposed to create like some more of an emotional connection. There's things where they're more like head connections, like mind connections. You're sharing the same thing, the same interest, reading the same book, things like that. And then body to body is like physical touch, which for a lot of kids is important too. And so I created that calendar where 30 days, it's just a different prompt, but I share it with families in the hopes that they will use it to spark ideas to create their own prompts. Because
Oh,
those
yeah.
all of those prompts aren't going to be applicable to you or to your family, but
Yeah.
it might spark ideas for you to say, "Well, I'm going to change this one, or I'm going to do this instead." Because when I did it, and I thought that my connection was pretty good with my kids, and then I sat there and did the 30-day connection calendar, and I was like, oh my goodness,
Mm.
there were a lot of moments that I was missing, and it just felt really good to intentionally spend a month just focusing on connection, like,
Mhm.
and the kids noticed it too,
Wow.
like
I'm sure.
they noticed it too, and so it's something that I actually print out and I just keep handy, and I try to check things off of it, not just during
Yeah.
that 1 month when I'm doing it, but all the time, just a total, just always mentally checking in, like,
Yeah.
because there are roadblocks that happen in life
Mhm.
with to roadblocks to connection that happen, and I think that one of the biggest roadblocks that we experience is distraction. And we get distracted by so many things. We get distracted by just our to-do list. We get distracted by the activities that we're driving our kids around to. We get like,
Yeah.
there's just so many things that could be distractions. But if you really just took inventory of how you spend your time in your day, I want it to line up to the things that we value. So I want the things that we do to actually be the appropriate amount of time. Like if I'm saying
Yeah.
that I value deep connection with my kids, or that I value spending time outdoors, then I want to make sure that that's reflected in how we spend our time. And so
Mhm.
taking inventory of those things, I think, is really important. And spending time intentionally doing things that you value is also important.
Yeah. It's interesting how many people downloaded it because that it that tells you that this is a message that is
Mm.
very much needed. It's interesting because Pam Leo talked about in her book is Connection Parenting, and she talks about how we're really under resourced, for what our kids need in terms of emotionally and everything else. That if
Right.
it used to be done, in a group, if there was a lot of family around, that kids are getting attention from grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins, and that these days a lot of it just falls on the shoulders of two parents or one parent, um,
Yeah.
and so
And
those prompts are very helpful.
yeah, and even just thinking about what we were talking about before about how even in a loving home, how
Hmm.
children can be unseen. I mean,
Yeah.
when you think about it, um, gosh, even just asking yourself, what are the ways that my children are visible in my home, and what are the ways that they are invisible?
Hmm.
Um, and I think that that can show up in really large ways and even in small ways. Like if do they feel valued? Do they feel like their interests are valued? Do they feel like they can come to you and talk to you about anything? Do they feel like they can come to you and talk to you about things that you could potentially be upset by? um, what kind of space have you allowed for that, for disagreement or for I don't know, I ask myself a lot of questions.
Hmm.
And I think just asking that question sometimes helps me to realize um, to what degree my children are visible, because I
Yeah.
want them to be visible to me, to each other, but I want them to feel like they are visible as well.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. You really have, I've thought a lot about different things after reading through your website and your Instagram, and it's challenging. It's good.
Yeah, it
Uh,
is challenging. It's not the easiest work to always
yeah,
be so intentional or to always be
but
so
it's good
thoughtful about
though,
things, but it's good.
because growth is good.
Yeah.
Well, one of the other resources that you're involved with is the Black Culture Anthology. So you
Yes.
say whether you're black, white, brown, or anything else, there's room for you at this table. You're invited to join in the conversation. Our aim through this anthology is that your family grows in cultural awareness as you focus in on the beauty and wonder within Black culture and other cultures as we continue to develop this series of curriculum to celebrate cultures around the world. So I'd love to hear more about the Black Culture Anthology. I've
Yeah.
seen some posts about it.
Yeah. So I helped to create that anthology with Tiffany from
Yes, I
Wonder
know
Here.
Tiffany from Wonder Here. Yep.
Yes.
I love Tiffany.
Um,
She was at Wild and Free.
yes, she was.
Yeah.
She's actually my cousin. It's her husband is my cousin.
I love that. I think I actually did catch that too.
Yes,
I
yes.
love that's really special.
Yeah. So we worked together to produce this anthology, but when we were thinking about all the resources that tend to be available, usually around Black History Month, we just felt like we weren't. There was a component that was missing. Studying history is great, but celebrating Black culture. Culture encompasses so many different things.
Yeah.
Like it's history, but it's also language and food and it's a celebration and there's a
Yeah.
lot of joy. And so we wanted to create something where people could have it as a resource to help celebrate Black
Yeah.
culture. And
Yeah.
so there are child authors in there writing about things as normal as, I am smart, I am kind, to be Black, to be who they are is, it's not just the Black historical experiences, but it's the everyday child
Yeah.
experiences too. And so there's child authors, there's adult authors. We had contribute to there's book lists in there. There's lots of hands-on activities. I mean, it's chock full.
Well, I
It
know
can
I saw you said recipes, research challenges, invitations
yes,
to create,
yes.
opportunities for intentional reflection, poetry study, so much in
There's
there.
so much in there,
Yeah.
and it's just a really beautiful piece of work. And so we put that out there, and it's available on the
Yep, I
website.
saw you can buy it on your website.
Yep.
And you probably have immediate access to it.
Yep, because you can buy the
Yeah.
digital file. There's a print and ship option, but there's also a digital option,
Yeah.
and so you'll have immediate access. But it's just a beautiful resource. I'm
Yeah.
proud of it.
Yeah, you should be. And your kids are involved. And I've seen you post about opportunities for other people to get involved. Uh,
Yes, yes. So my kids, two of my children were two of the child authors who are included.
I love
They
that.
love doing activities from that
Yeah.
anthology, and We had a call for a writing competition that happened earlier
That's what I saw.
last month where we were wanting to add more child authors. So we had a writing competition asking for submissions. But even without that competition, the end of the anthology even says, share your experiences with us. You know, like if you have something you want to write, write it and send it in because it's, you know, studying history and studying culture involves listening to each other's stories.
Hmm.
And we all have, you know, stories to tell. And the
Yeah,
beauty is that we can listen to stories cross culturally, and we can appreciate each other's stories. And I think that, you know, that place of listening and respecting and honoring and celebrating is something that um, I want to do with other people.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, so it's called the Black Culture Anthology. That's available on your website. You have a family hiking log, which kind of
yes,
goes in line with what you had talked about
yes,
earlier.
mhm,
So you talk about building connection through family hikes, so people
yes.
can log it, keep
We
track.
it's a log that I created where you know my kids always we like to go back to the same places sometimes, and then sometimes we like to go to new places. But before we head out, they always want to know where are we going, and so I have to keep track of the places that we're going, but I can't just write the name down of the place. I always have to write
Mm,
some other interesting tidbit, like
yeah.
something interesting that happened there, and that's always what jogs people's memory about the trail that we're going to. So
Hmm.
I created a log because it's something that my kids like to do. So I was like, maybe other people will like to do this too. You know, you log how far you hiked. You
Yeah.
log an interesting thing that happened, what the weather was like, and it's just something to keep. And then when you go back to those same places, you remember those experiences.
Yeah, I love that idea. I mean, and then, okay, then this last thing, which I've also seen you write about a lot, is the project time checklist and the guide to loose
Yes.
parts. You talk about this project time
Yes.
quite a bit, self-directed learning, kids are
Mhm.
engaged in what's meaningful to them.
Yeah. So I talk a lot about project based learning and self directed learning, work that's kids working on their own interests and doing things that are really going after their passions in a way that they're not just they're directing the process and managing the process. And I talk a lot about that. I actually had a Q&A on that yesterday. I went live on Instagram, and one of the things that I said was that it's possible to have a project. I feel like as parents, all of us are in some ways rounding out our kids' educations at home. It doesn't really
Hmm.
matter where your kids go to school. We're all doing that. We started to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
And project based learning is about being a mentor for your kids who have their own interests. So that can be whether your children are in school or they're not, but it's about noticing their interests and then wanting to come alongside of them and help mentor them to be able to do more with that interest or do something deeper or do better work,
Hmm.
deeper work.
Yeah.
And so I talk a lot about that, and I talk about doing that ourselves so that we can help mentor our kids through that process. But we all want to do meaningful work. We all want to
Hmm.
spend our lives doing what we believe is meaningful. And so why not help kids do that too? Like live a
Yeah.
life doing that.
Yeah. Well, I love it. I think, they talk about like that hospitality. I used to think that hospitality was like about inviting people into your home, which I think it is. But then I had read this thing that said hospitality is about how you make people feel. And I just think that everything that you offer is inviting and exciting and it has this spark to it. So the Black Culture Anthology and the 30 Days of Connection calendar, it's very inviting. It feels very accessible, and so if people are wanting, Leslie, to find your resources, can you tell them where to go?
Yes, definitely. You can find all of these things that we've talked about on lesliemartino.com. I have a blog there, I have a shop there, there's those resources there. And there's even a link to my Instagram there because I tend
Yeah,
to, I like to write and I tend to do a lot of that writing in the captions of my Instagram
yeah.
posts. So you can even get to my Instagram page from that, lesliemartino.com from my
Mhm.
blog. Um,
And
but
that's
that's
where
that.
people would find information on the Thrive at Home coaching,
Yes.
one-on-one coaching. They would find information there as well.
Yes. Yes.
You just got a lot to offer, so I'll make sure I link to that so people can find it easily. But
Thank you.
lesliemartino.com, and And we usually end with a favorite childhood memory of yours, if you have one in nature, or just another one like we talked about that was just full of sensory experiences, something that stood out to you from your childhood.
First thing that popped into my mind uh, was gardening with my mother. We grew up in New York City, but my mom was very interested in nature. She grew up in the Caribbean, so I'm surrounded by nature. But she always tried to bring that into our urban experience. And
Wow.
we had this garden, and I have these beautiful memories of gardening with her. To this day, I only like the taste of earthy tomatoes, beets, anything that tastes earthy. I love because it reminds me of my mother's garden.
Aw.
Yeah, and so that's like one of my fondest memories. Digging up earthworms. My brother used to capture them, put them in bottles, capture salamanders, but just
Mhm.
just
Right
side
in
by
New York.
side, all of us
Yeah.
together in the dirt.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Isn't that beautiful? It's a beautiful simplicity.
Yes,
I love it.
for sure.
Leslie, you've just given us all so much to think about and ponder and be excited about. And I just am so grateful for the time that you spent. Thank you.
Amy, thank you so much. This was such a pleasure.
Yeah, I can't wait till we can connect again.
Me neither.
Bye bye.
Bye.